1952, and in May of 1953, a telephone call at our house at 9 Elm Street, where John Leonard now lives. We sold that house to his parents, and they sold it to young John. And his telephone voice said, "This is Jim Allen." Well, I had known Jim as a telephone voice because when we lived in New London, I was active in the Boy Scouting organization, and I would call two people in Mystic, Howard Turner and Jim Allen, and ask them if they would raise money for Boy Scouts. And they would call 4 or 5 of their well-heeled friends, and they would always end up with $4,000 or $5,000 for people at council. So somehow, I guess that Jim learned that we had moved to Mystic, and his question on the telephone was, "How would you like to join Masons out on the Yacht Club?" Well, we said, "What's that?" Because we had belonged to the Ames Yacht Club in London and the Pequot Beach Club, and we used to go back there to do our swimming and our boating and social affairs, but he assured us that Masons out on the Yacht Club was a pretty nice place to be. So we came down and looked it over and decided, yes, this is what we should do. And the first day we were here, Marnie Heiniger and her dear beloved husband and all of her kids were there. They had 5, we had 5. Soderbergs had 4, Burnett's had 3, Townsend's had 5. It was a family of a lot of kids in those days. And we loved what we saw, and so we became members. And the surprising part about it, in 4 years' time, 5 years' time, I was named Commodore of the Yacht Club, much to my very much surprise. There have been 40 Commodores in the 71 years of existence of the club. Most of these people have served 2 years, some served 1 year, and one of them, his term of office was cut short by military orders, and more about that later on. When we first came to the club, one of the delightful persons that we met early on was Mary Clark, Joan's mother. She seemed to be the only one who cared about stubbed toes. Our little youngster Stevie was about 2.5 years old, and he never proceeded at any pace except a full run. And going down the hump of the road, invariably he would stub his toe and would be blood all over the place, and Mary would pull out her pocketbook or bag, and here would be band-aids and so on. And we learned that we didn't have to bring them because Mary always had them. We used the road. She served a wonderful purpose for us. It's interesting to note, I put some numbers down here, which we're not supposed to use, you said, but I'm going to use it anyway. I was the 17th Commodore, and time has taken away all the preceding 16s except my good friend Arthur, and I don't think I see Bob Burnett here tonight. Bob, are you here? No, he's not. So those two and myself, I guess by rank, not necessarily by age, because we're some of the younger people here. This is coming out for a long time. We did return Jim's favor in 1954 when the Tercentenary Parade was organized by what was our good friend? Byron Hatfield, thank you very much. And Jim was going to be the leading figure in the parade, dressed or undressed, as you might describe it, in his Indian costume. We didn't know where he was going to change from one uniform to the other, so we offered him the basement of the house at 9 Elm Street. And Jim came, loaded down with all of his stuff, and we didn't see him again for about an hour or so later, when all of a sudden came this magnificent Indian out of the basement and walked down to the head of the parade. And I tell you, the Mashantuckets and the Mohegans would really, really be jealous of him. I want to say something about the Jet 14s that Bill mentioned. The first batch that were made, I think, were made someplace in New Jersey. And then a lot of boats were bought. The next year, someone up in Massachusetts, just over the Connecticut border, began to manufacture jets, and we thought, well, that's closer to go up there and get one than it would be to go to New Jersey. So we bought one that was number 277. Turned out to be the slowest boat in the whole thing. It's never been moved. The Burnett sailed it, the Soderberg sailed it, our kids sailed it. It always came in last. Eventually, we either gave it or sold it to the Andy Wheeler, and I don't know what they did. We finally found out the reason for it. The original boat, the mast went all the way through, and were basically stepped on actually the bottom of the hull. And this manufacturer had made them steps so it was on the little story about the Jet 14, which is kind of personal. I regret telling this, but I think if I don't, it's not really truly remembering. I mentioned about that Commodore whose career was shortchanged by military orders and happened to be me, because I took over in 1958 from Bob Burnett, and Jenny Lassen was the chairman of the House Committee, and that was a very important job because she and I and the other members of the trustees and staff got all the committee chair people ready for the next year. We hired Dieter Schopp, who was our counselor for the year. And in those days, of course, the counselors did one counselor did everything. They taught setting, they taught tennis, they taught swimming, they took care of the house, everything here, and they kept the junior yacht club people in good shape. And Dieter was one of them. But anyway, we didn't get our boat until that second year, and I hadn't left on the cruise until mid-June. And we had the boat in the water the end of May, and we came down for an evening picnic, and our two older kids had been sailing the boat in a race, and they were all along the, where they tied up over here on the north side of the dock. And I went down, I'll sort of have to reenact this with my glass in hand, we carried glasses in those days. And I got down to it was high tide, and I stepped on the deck, put my hand on the mast. Watch out! And into the water went the Commodore. I think they were glad to see me go in the country.